Hello and welcome to the Mets in the UK podcast, your home for Mets content in the UK. Coming at you with another episode from our guest series. As a reminder, you can catch the podcast on Spotify, YouTube, and all good podcast hosts. You can also find us on Facebook, Instagram, Blue Sky, and X at Mets in the UK, or you can use the hashtag MITUK to get involved. Now, as I said, we've had our guest series running this off season. So far, we've been fortunate to be joined by a range of wonderful guests. And we're joined by another one this evening in Mike Janela. Mike, how are you doing?
I'm great. Thank you so much for having me on here. I'm just excited to try and be a better guest than Colin Cosell and Wayne Randazzo were. That's my only goal today.
Challenge accepted. Okay. Also, alongside Mike Pizzini, we've got my usual podcasting partner in crime, Toria. How are you doing this evening, Toria?
Evening. All well. Thank you very much. How are you doing, Tom?
I am good. Thank you for asking. And she's back again, the glue that holds us all together, the boss herself, Tracey. How are you doing this evening?
I'm good. It's lovely to see your faces on this cold evening here.
Yes, absolutely. Okay, so we are joined by Mike Janela, who is one half of the Mets pre-game show. Those of you who maybe have not been to Citi Field before, you can catch the pre-game show, as the name suggests, before the Mets game begins. Mike is one of the presenters alongside Emily Rappert for that. So just to start us off, Mike, can you tell us a bit about what you do for the Mets and how you came into the role in the first place?
So, and I'm glad you shouted out Emily because it is really a two-person team, and she's been there, I think, 8 or 9 years now, and I just finished my 6th season there. So we've spent a lot of time together, and yeah, pretty much my work wife and vice versa, spend more time with her than my own family sometimes during baseball season when the Mets are home. But essentially, if you come to a Mets game in person, we want to make sure that you have a full entertainment and informative experience the entire time, that you don't have to be on your phone, that you can be, even when the game's not happening, fully enjoying it and fully immersed. And so we have our little 20-minute pregame show, like you mentioned. Once fans are in the stadium, this is all blasted on the biggest scoreboard screen in baseball and all the TVs throughout the park, and just getting you ready for the game that night, whether it's talking about stats for the game or reviewing highlights from the game before, what food might be available, if we have a guest to interview, a celebrity or a notable person or some fans, or, little games we play. There's part game show element to it. Really just making sure that everyone knows what's on deck, I guess, to use a baseball pun, for the game that night. And then we, of course, throughout the game also have various segments that we do during inning breaks, and whether that's breaking down a really cool play from the night before in more detail, or having a kid try and hit as many wiffle ball home runs over a fence in 30 seconds as possible to win a prize. Again, we just want to make sure that everyone's having a good time, everyone feels like they're enjoying themselves, and that you don't need anything else there at the game. And then on top of that, sometimes there's stuff on the side as well. Former players might come back and we'll get to host a Q&A with them for season ticket holders. Or I used to host a talk show on our X page for the Mets after games, or interviews with celebrities who are in town, or for YouTube or things like that. So the main thing is there during the game, but then we try and have as much fun on the outside of that as possible too.
So how much of your day begins before that? Like, what sort of time are you getting to the stadium before all the pregame happens? What sort of prep goes in before all of that begins?
If it's a standard day, I usually aim for about 2 hours before first pitch, because we go live about 1 hour before first pitch, a little bit less than that sometimes. And a lot of that work can be done, thankfully, from home these days. There's Google Docs, there's iMessage, all this stuff. So as we're putting together the idea for the game that night, I can do that from home while I'm cleaning the dishwasher, or waxing the car. I've never waxed my car. I don't know why I thought about that as the example, but you get it, like doing household stuff.
Yeah.
And then being able to get in the car and get out to Citi Field in time to settle in, wardrobe change, get the makeup on, all that kind of stuff, get something to eat, etc. Before we do that. So yeah, normally I'm there. Let's say if it's a 7:10 p.m. first pitch, I aim to be there by 5:15. It's never a guarantee with New York City traffic, especially coming from New Jersey, 2 rivers away. But the thing about the job is that after a while, it because of baseball's nature, it being very repetitive and consistent, we do get into a groove. So after the first couple of weeks of the season, it's basically the same infrastructure every time. It's just how do we have some fun and do some new things within that. So we don't have to, luckily, come up with something entirely new every single day where we have to spend hours and hours preparing it. It's really cool to be able to show up kind of almost when the fans are starting to show up and feel the buzz of game day the same time that I arrive to go to work, quote unquote.
Yeah, absolutely. And sort of working alongside Emily with that sort of, you said you've been there for 6 years. She's been there for 8 or 9 years. Is that sort of that chemistry over time? Because you guys, certainly the times I've seen it, it's very slick. You guys don't cut each other off. It's very professional in that sense. Obviously, it's your job. But how much of that sort of on screen, in the stadium, sort of relationship between you two, how much work goes into that? Or is it just you riffing off each other whilst things happen?
You can't really plan that. Anytime you see, whether it's 2 actors or it's 2 hosts or 2 dancers or anyone that's like in a performance space, you can't force chemistry. It's just not something, it comes naturally. So I think it comes with time though. And like with any relationship, you learn certain people's cadences and certain people's preferences. And after working with Emily now, I know that if I make a country music reference, she's going to pick it right up because she's a big country music fan. But if I talk about pro wrestling, it's going to go right over her head. But we've gotten to the point now where she knows how to respond to that. And if I do bring up pro wrestling, she knows that she's comfortable enough with me to say, Mike, I don't get that joke, and then make a joke back, and I can have fun with that. And so there's that way where as you become more, it's like with any 2 athletes too, a pitcher and a catcher, like you learn the rhythms of the other person just over time and repetition. And doing it for 6 years together now, you just kind of pick that up, especially when we're doing it sometimes 7, 8, 9 days in a row, as a baseball homestand goes, or for 80 plus times per summer in such a condensed schedule. So it's funny because over the years we have had other personalities either join us as a third person. Justin T. Manning was there for select games this past year. I have to shout out Justin as part of the team as well. Or when Emily would need a day off or vice versa, and we have someone else come in, then it's like, oh wait, this isn't the glove I'm used to wearing. Like, this is something new I have to figure out. And trying to have a third person in there or a different person, it is very different because you're not in that same cadence and that same rhythm every day. But that's also part of the fun and the challenge is having different personalities. And for me as a TV host in general, I think it's great brain exercise to try and figure out, and personality exercise, how you can fit with all different kinds of people. But yeah, certainly it's not something we do drills on, every morning. Hey, let's do chemistry practice and play board games or anything like that. It just comes with the territory of doing the work together over time.
Cool. Thank you. Tom?
And so obviously we're in the off season now. What are you doing to keep busy over this time? How do you keep yourself active? How do you keep yourself fresh, ready to go into next year? What do your days consist of right now?
It's the same question my wife asks me whenever this season's over. What are you doing now? Like, I'm just sitting here on the couch catching up on all my shows. That's the life of a freelancer. And, with the Mets as well, I'm not a full-time yearly employee. They have a lot of people that are there going into the office right now in the middle of the winter, a few days a week. And that's not me. So you have to just pick up a lot of other things. And for me, it's a little bit different every year, but I have a couple of other steady jobs that don't happen in the summer so much that pick up now in the winter. For example, MSG Network is a sports channel here in New York. It's where basically the basketball and the hockey teams have their games broadcast. So the Knicks, the Rangers, Islanders, Devils, and I do some sports betting content for them. So before a Knicks game, you might see me in the pregame show for 5 minutes saying that you should or should not take this over under tonight, and don't blame me if you lose any money for your mortgage payment. So that's, one thing. I host a bunch of different things for the American Kennel Club. So dogs, if you're a dog fan, on their social media. Person. Yeah, there you go. Who's not a dog fan, right? and some syndicated shows that they have across a bunch of different TV networks here, coast to coast. And then, random things. The other week, I emceed an awards gala for teenagers and preteens at Carnegie Hall for a speech and drama competition. I've done corporate fundraisers. I go to different, just all kinds of these like live events that need some kind of an MC, an auction, or all that kind of stuff. So you pick up things here and there, and you get really good after you're doing it for 20 years, knowing that if you're not working, you're not making money. You get really good at finding work and keeping yourself busy. But I do try and also relax and enjoy some free time, because once baseball season does come around, and I'm spending 3.5 hours in a car every day to go to a baseball stadium and bring that energy and be on, so to speak, for 40,000 people night after night. It is very mentally and physically, in a way, taxing. So I try not to just work in the off season. I do try and recharge the batteries a little bit. So there are more days of, it's raining outside, I'm just going to sit here and watch Hulu for 3 hours. So there is part of that in the off season too.
Nice. I mean, there is a lot of running around that you guys do at the ballpark. Like, it seems like you blink and you were one place one moment, and then it changes, and suddenly like Emily's behind you on the concourse somewhere. Like, oh, how did that happen? So I imagine some downtime is much deserved at that point.
Secret tunnels is the key. We can access, underneath the stadium that fans can't. So we are kind of able to get, from point A to point B a little bit quicker than usual. But after you check the phone or the Apple Watch and you've logged 5,000 steps in like 2 hours, and you realize, I've been, fighting around people on the concourse, making sure I don't knock somebody's beer or hot dog over to get from point A to point B, and ups and downs and all that stuff. So it can be a lot, but it's fun. I mean, I'm working in sports for my favorite team, and it's, not many things better.
Cool. So what are your thoughts on 2024 for the Mets? And do you have a favorite moment from the year?
2024, I know it didn't end in a ring or even in a pennant, but for me, I think it was my favorite season as a Mets fan, not even as an employee, just as a fan, my entire life. And for me, my big teams were those turn of the century teams, the 99 Mets, the 2000 Mets, because I was 14, 15, and that's kind of when these sports stars are still like Greek gods to you at that age. And you just look up to them and you think, wow, like, who are these superheroes? And you go to high school and class the next morning, and everyone's talking about it. And it was pre-social media, so this was like the only thing on anyone's mind. So for me, those teams were always sort of in this pantheon, up on a mantle above all others. And there have been obviously plenty of other good seasons since 2006 and 2015, and even the Buck Showalter year, winning the most games in team history for a regular season. All had fun moments, but in terms of the ups and the downs and the characters, and we don't have to, relitigate everything, but everything from Grimace to OMG to all that stuff, like, there was just nothing like it. And the way that people online took to it, and the way that people at the stadiums were dressing up in costumes, and it was like Comic-Con out there every day. And the team was winning, and they were playing like fun, exciting baseball too. It wasn't, boring, grind them out games. It was like exciting and so dramatic, and just so many personalities. So for me, it ranked, I think, now that I have the perspective of a couple months, I think my most fun Mets season as whether a fan or employee in my whole life. And I've had almost 4 decades of these now, so that's not nothing. But and in a particular moment, it's going to be clinching the NLDS against the Phillies. It was the first postseason series win, clinched at Citi Field ever. So to be there for that was cool enough. But then that moment, Francisco going yard and just that grand slam that we're never going to forget. I blacked out. I was there, and I had been watching the game in a more secluded area for a bit, because I don't really like engaging with people when tensions are high. I like to just kind of focus. But I decided, let me take a walk, and I went into one of the seating sections there, next to the fans, next to one of the ushers, and I just, for some reason, and lucky me, that happened, and I was just hugging, strangers, people jumping on me, and vice versa, and it was incredible. And then later that night, on a professional and personal level, being able to get on the field afterward, and this was kind of an exclusive for the people that stayed at the stadium after the final out. After the team, did their champagne celebrations in the clubhouse, they came back out, and we were able to interview a whole bunch of them live for the fans who had stayed. And so talking to Brandon Nimmo with tears in his eyes after his grandmother had passed just a couple of weeks prior, and the guy who'd been on the Mets longer than anybody, and you couldn't tell if it was champagne or tears on his face, but just the gratitude of him and being able to talk to him about that, or talk to Pete Alonso, who, as of the time of this recording, we still don't know if he's going to be a Met next year or not. But just seeing sort of the wistfulness in his personality and how much it meant to him, no matter what the future holds, to have won that game and that series and have that season, and just all those people. And so to be part of that, that's something that was very special for me and for those people that got to be there after that game. But something I think we can all share was, winning that game in the first place, and that Lindor home run that, I'm never going to forget.
And I think, one of the things that came through, particularly during the postseason, for you being there as a fan and seeing it as a fan, you posted some videos from in the ballparks and stuff, and there was, the shared struggle of being out and about and wanting to watch the game on your phone or a tablet or whatever.
Yeah.
I think it was good to have kind of that perspective as well. We're so used to seeing you as Mike on the field. It's obvious that you're a fan of the team, but then getting to see kind of that side as well. It was just being able to kind of enjoy that momentum alongside everybody else. I think was, it was really cool from a fan here, where again, most of our
for your video viewers, the biggest Mets fan in the house, my cat, just joined. So he's hi, everybody. Yeah.
It's usually my cat that makes an appearance. So.
Oh, well, I'm glad I could take the mantle. Well, he's a black cat too, and obviously anyone who knows our Mets history, black cats and the Mets
Yes.
go very far back. So, no, and it's interesting because working in sports as a fan-facing personality, it's changed a lot in the last 10, 15 years, but traditionally you're supposed to be very objective and not wear your fandom on your sleeve. I think that's changed a lot now with social media and the internet and people even on old school network TV, letting those, we all know you're human, you have your preferences, you grew up, rooting for whoever you rooted for. And so it's been really fortuitous for me that professionally I've gotten to work for the team that, my dad has raised me a fan of since even before I was born, as I like to say. And so to be able to let loose a little bit and genuinely feel that happiness as a fan, but also get to sort of be the avatar for the rest of the fans, that I get that ability to ask Brandon Nimmo about what this means to him, that every other fan, if I was just a regular fan, I would look at that and say, yeah, wow, that's great that a real Mets fan gets to talk to Brandon. Like, I wish I could. And I don't take that privilege lightly. It's something that I try not to geek out over too much because I do still have a job to do in the end. But I do love the fact that, I don't have to fake it. When I'm interviewing a Mets legend, when I'm talking to Mike Piazza, his career means a lot to me. And so I'm not going to shortchange fans on that. And it's something that, no matter where I go, I used to, work for the San Diego Padres. I hosted a talk show for them for a year, and I wasn't faking anything. Like, when that team did well, I was very happy and I really bought in and became a great respecter and part of that fan base too. Still a lot of people that I still interact with on social media to this day. Just such a great fan base that welcomed me after a while with relative open arms. As an outsider, I couldn't blame them for being a little bit barriered at the beginning, but nothing beats the ability to match that longevity you have with a team and an organization and a fan base with being able to have a professional element to that as well. And, certainly my ambitions as a TV host or media personality, maybe one day won't just be limited to Queens, but no matter where you go and where you're going to be, and speaking myself where I go or where I'm going to be, this will always be one of the most treasured runs of my life and my career, because of that marriage of a team that I remember crying over when I was 8 years old when they lost the game, that now I got to actually be on the field that I dreamed of playing on as a little leaguer. And I couldn't do that, but I did get to make the major leagues, and I did get to be a Met, quote unquote. And that's something that I'm never going to take for granted and never forget.
That's amazing. And you mentioned there, speaking to a few of the players and having the opportunity to do that. Is there a standout, either a player, past or present, or a staff member that you've particularly enjoyed working with or talking to?
Brandon Nimmo is the first one that comes to mind. He's a guy that, again, not many of the Mets that are still around were there when I started in 2019. There's been a lot of roster turnover, but he was someone that was still kind of ascending at that point. And we did a couple things early on in my tenure there with him. And one of those was right before COVID hit. The Mets had a Fan Fest event February of 2020. It was like February 1st. And then New York shut down like 2 weeks later. And he was there with Mookie Wilson and me, and we did a panel discussion for like 20 minutes, and he was just so funny and like down to earth and forthcoming and engaging. And that a lot of players have been like that. But then the amazing thing about Brandon is that, I don't interact with the players often. I'm not like a Steve Phelps that's talking to them every single day for SNY. Or like the radio team or the play-by-play guys or whoever. I'll talk to the players, at best, maybe once a homestand, then it's always somebody different, and there's not that consistency. But Brandon was always the guy that would see me. We'd like cross paths in those tunnels, and he'd be like, "Hey, Mike, how are you?" And like he remembers, and he just remembers and makes that connection. Yeah. And he doesn't have to. He's a guy now with a huge contract and a lot of responsibilities, and he does charity events and he films TV commercials, and he also has to play in the outfield, and he's got to go take batting practice. And for him to have that extra layer of that nicety and that camaraderie with someone that, he doesn't owe me anything, just always takes it to that next level. And then, being able to talk with him after that division series win against the Phillies, and, he came up and like, he hugged me before we even went on camera. And, that wasn't me asking for anything. And just the fact that he was so willing to share that emotion with someone that he's not even that close with in me, just always, has struck me. That guy is someone that is just so nice and never says no, and is just really the kind of person you'd love to hang out with, even if you never knew what he did for a living. So he's the one I think that sticks out for me. But there have been so many. I mean, Mookie Wilson, who I mentioned, it could do a comedy special on his own. He's just great at one line.
We're Mookie fans.
Yeah,
we love Mookie.
Not a big Mookie fan. It's incredible. David Wright, I only got to chat with him one time, but he is as nice and as incredible and as cool as you would expect him to be. I got to sit down with Mike Piazza once for like a 30-minute thing and just picking his brain, just talking about baseball and those teams was amazing. Darryl Strawberry's always been so forthcoming with being available and saying yes to things. So the list goes on and on. Sean Manaea, again, a Met who may or may not be back next year, but talk to you like you guys went to high school together, even if you met for the first time. Just so many great personalities, luckily, that have come through there in my time, and I'm just so lucky that I've been able to interact with more than my fair share.
Speaking of interaction, CJ on Twitter, who is self-proclaimed Jeff McNeil #1 fan. CJ's actually in Belgium. He was hanging with us in London this year. He gets himself over to City Field, but he adores Jeff. And he has asked if Jeff is always so quiet, or at least as quiet as he seems.
No. So I remember we launched a segment on YouTube a couple of years ago for the first time. We don't do it anymore. It was called In the Cage. And I would literally be lurking outside the batting cage like a creepy stalker with our social media team, waiting to see like what player would be willing to talk to us just for 5 minutes about the upcoming series after they just took BP. And the first person we ever did it with was Jeff McNeil. And it was a great interview. And he wasn't quiet. I think Jeff's the kind of guy, and a lot of players are like this. Once it's business time, it's business time. I think the best example of that in my Mets tenure is probably Max Scherzer, who on game day, stay 100 feet away. Like Max is locked
Yeah.
in, don't talk to him. And that goes for teammates, that goes for coaches. Like he knows his thing and that's it. But Jeff, when he's outside of that, I think you see him on social media with his kids or when he's out doing golf events in the off season, stuff like that. He has a personality. Like he's a nice guy. He's a fun guy. It's just once that light goes on, you become a different person. But and I remember and this will be a funny story for CJ. The one thing Jeff wanted to make sure of when we did that interview was that it wasn't going to be for the big screen, because he didn't want to be distracted by like himself and focusing on, did I say the right thing? Did I look okay? Whatever in the middle of a game, because that would distract from his approach at the plate, I would assume, right? Like no, just on YouTube, and only on YouTube to the Mets 1 million subscribers, and on Twitter 2 million followers. That's the only place it's going to be. Okay, I'm cool with that. So yeah, I think Jeff he is a really good guy in the few interactions I've had with him. It's just when it's time to clock in and get the lunch pail, it's time to go to work for him.
That's fair.
I think one of the things you just said about there was the big screen. I know we talked about this very briefly before the show started. As a Met fan, like seeing that big change at Citi Field, the big screen coming in, how was it that first time you set eyes on it? And then what was it like seeing yourself on that screen? Like, do you ever look up and sort of see yourself and think, whoa?
The first time I set eyes on that screen, my first thought was like, holy crap, I got to start wearing more makeup. It's going to expose a lot of flaws. No, I mean, marvelous. And you do get a little bit jaded sometimes, I think, because you go to different arenas or stadiums in any sport, and it's an arms race now. Who can get the bigger screen? Who can get the brighter lights? Who can get the louder speakers? But then you saw that screen, especially with what the setup was beforehand, and it really blew you away. And the first time I saw it, it was off. There was nothing on it. So it didn't really hit me because it was just a plain black screen. But then the first time I showed up and there was actually like a full-on video on there.
Mario Kart.
Yeah, exactly. The Mario Kart was a perfect example. I used to play Mario Kart on N64 on my parents' like 32-inch, cathode ray tube TV. So to see that now in 8K on the biggest screen in baseball was crazy. And so that was my first thought, selfishly, to be honest, was, how am I going to look on that thing? That's a little bit scary. And it's funny because normally I don't see myself because I'm looking at the camera. So I can't be looking at the screen because then you're going to see that I'm not looking at the camera or looking at whoever I'm talking with. But there are some times that we pre-record something, for example, and I know that it's coming up and I can watch myself, while I'm on a break or whatever. And that's weird. And I look at it more like game tape, and I'm like, maybe a little bit more powder under your eyes next time, or don't wear that shirt because it's not very flattering when you're 100 feet tall. So things like that, where it's shocking at first. You do get used to it eventually, because again, we're there every single day, 81 plus times a year. So it is weird to say that you get used to it, but you kind of do. But yeah, at the beginning there, it was pretty wild, but it makes for good content. Being able to say that's me up on the gigantic 8K television.
The hat shuffle still just baffles my eyes on there, even when it's so much bigger.
That's by design, because we figure, hey, if the hat shuffle is that much bigger and easier, we got to make it more difficult for you. So that's not meant to be simple.
No, indeed, it's fun.
Yeah. And the light combo when like Diaz comes out on the field with the big screen, that's a moment as a Mets fan. It's
incredible when it's one thing on TV or you see it on a social media clip, but being there in person when it's a close game, when it's a full house, when it's a big opponent. I mean, I think the Mets kind of revolutionized that. You see other teams doing other things now. The Twins, I think, had a big presentation for Joan Duran this season as well. But I think we were kind of the innovators in that regard. And that was part of, everyone thinks about the big screen, but part of that whole renovation of that stadium at the same time were all of the smaller LED screens around the stadium, the ribbon boards, as they call them, all the light panels. I mean, the baseball stadiums used to take an hour to get the lights turned on. Now you can flick it in literally a second. And so that ability and to do different colors and things like that, when you have that many toys in the toy chest, that deep of a bag, you got to dig in there and figure out what kind of new and exciting things you can do. So the Edwin entrance was one thing. This past year when an opposing pitcher would come in out of the bullpen and they kind of did that subway, stand clear of the closing doors thing. Like that's what that production team there does, is constantly think of new and exciting things to add to that experience. And I have no idea what they're going to come up with for next year, but I can guarantee you it's going to be new stuff and not just resting on their laurels. But again, it comes down to what makes it worth getting off of your couch, because you can watch a game at home with food right there in the kitchen, your phone there. It's not cold or too hot. Like you're home. You don't have to go anywhere. Why do you want to get off that experience and get to the stadium? What makes it worth your while? And if we can do everything from a pregame show with me and Emily, to you might have a chance to win something between innings, to this incredible adrenaline-filled moment that you can experience unlike anywhere else when Edwin Diaz comes in. From the moment you get to the stadium to the moment you're waiting for the 7 train back home or in the parking lot, what can we do to make you say, man, I'm so glad I came here instead of watching this at home? And that's kind of, our MO day after day.
If that doesn't convince anyone listening to go to Citi Field, especially if you've never been before, like honestly, book your flights, get going. It's absolutely worth every.
And it's the best food in sports. On top of all that, like you're gonna eat like a king or a queen. It's incredible. So you can't beat it.
So, Mike, you've spoken a bit about your work away from the Mets. Tell us a bit about your experience when you appeared on Pyramid and Jeopardy.
Yeah, my game show chapter of my career. So the 2 very different outcomes, because in Jeopardy, I got absolutely curb stomped by a buzzsaw. Mateo Roach ended up being, I think, the 4th or 5th winningest player in Jeopardy history. I think they won 23 straight games, and now have come back for continuous, best of and champions tournaments. So sometimes you run into the 1927 Yankees, and there's just nothing you can do. But so I'll come back to that in a second. Pyramid came first chronologically. That was 2018. And at the time, I was, I had found out I was struggling at work. This one job I was working for was a startup that ran out of funding and they shut down, and I didn't know what I was doing. So I started looking at different job boards for hosting opportunities. And one of them was a casting call for the $100,000 Pyramid. And I thought, I've loved game shows my whole life, but I never thought about going to play on them. I always thought about hosting them. But I figured, what, why not? Throw a shot in the dark here. Maybe I'll go on, win a couple grand. It'll be nice now that I'm unemployed. Give me something to do. And I applied. They got back to me, did a bunch of video calls and a bunch of like fake auditions and a bunch of chats with producers and a bunch of practicing the game. And then a couple months later, they said, hey, you want to come play? And I said, yeah, absolutely. So yeah, went there, actually was chosen as an alternate, did not play my first day that I was in the studio. And I was so bummed. I thought I missed my chance, but it was a good experience. At least I got to go to the studio, see what it was like. And then they called me back the next week and said, hey, do you want to be an alternate again? And I said, sure, I'm unemployed. It's a close drive. I don't have to do anything. I'll go back again. And then it was the complete opposite experience. They had to pull the person who was scheduled to play the very first game that day because they were ineligible for something they had kept off their application, which was found last minute by the standards and practices department. And they said, hey, Mr. Alternate, like, are you ready to go? And I went from expecting to sit around for 8 hours again in the green room, eating free snacks, to, I got to get my suit on and go to makeup, the hair and makeup, and get out there. And then I did extremely well. I won everything there is to win, not to be, too humble. But yeah, I was the first person in the history of the show to win both halves of the game, which gets you all of the money and also like a bonus vacation that they give away there. So no one had done that before. A couple of people have done it since, but I like to think that I set history there. And again, I was unemployed. I didn't work for 9 months. So you get a 6-figure like payday. I remember they sent me literally a check in the mail with $150,000 on it. And I had to go to the bank myself and cash that. It was the longest walk of my life. The bank was like 2 blocks away. I was clutching it to my chest, like, don't drop this. Please don't lose this. It was insane. But that really, it helped change my life in more ways than one. Because I was thinking at the time of giving up the TV hosting thing because there just weren't opportunities. But that money allowed me to at least, pay my bills and get by for a little bit longer. And then 5 months after my episode aired, the Mets job opened up. And then, the rest is history. So who knows? If that game hadn't have come along, I might have become a copywriter somewhere, or like a PR director or something, and would have never had that opportunity to go do what I do for the Mets and continue this career on camera. So thank you, the $100,000 pyramid, for a lot of things and a lot of layers. And then Jeopardy was a childhood dream. Like a lot of people here in the US, that was our dinner time TV. My parents, my grandparents, every night, 7:00, food on the table, Jeopardy on the TV. And I was always really good at it. I've always been good at trivia. I was the smart kid in school, hence why I was not a baseball player. And it was always, I was always playing Jeopardy in my mind whenever I watched, almost as practice, thinking, I'm not watching this for fun. I'm watching this because one day I'm going to be on this show. And I had applied a couple times over the years. They called me once for the teen tournament when I was a kid, but my younger brother hung up on them and thought it was a prank call. True story. And this was before smartphones, and we didn't have caller ID, and star 69 didn't work. So they never called me back. I guess they felt disrespected, or they thought they had the wrong number, and I couldn't get in touch with them. So I told my brother when I finally got on Jeopardy for real as an adult, he's now been forgiven. It was like a 20-year vendetta I held against him. So so finally, it was during COVID. They made the Jeopardy test available online, and I took it online. Same thing, some video call auditions. And I guess either my trivia knowledge or my winning personality won them over. And they brought me out there. My only, wish was that it was with the full audience, because it was still COVID protocol. There was no audience there. I couldn't bring like family or friends to come watch me. As much as I love Mayim Bialik, who was co-hosting at the time, she was my host. I would have loved to have been there for Alex Trebek or Ken Jennings, just because they're icons of this game that I've watched for 35 years at that point. And so it was great. And I knew, all right, you're very likely not to win. You have a shot, but this player that I got to see win a few games before my game was just so dominant. So I just really told myself, just enjoy this moment for what it is. Drink it in, and whether you win or you lose, just have fun and make some memories. And then my final Jeopardy answer, when I knew I couldn't win, was obviously Mets related. So that just lived up to that ethos. I've won a game show before, so if I lost on Jeopardy, it wasn't going to be the end of the world. And it was just, like I said, a lifelong dream fulfilled. And to tell you something that not many people know, I haven't watched an episode of Jeopardy since. It was kind of it was like, not because of any bitterness of losing or anything. It was just because I spent my whole life watching it thinking I'm going to be on that show one day. And then, when you're the dog, what do you do? And you finally catch the car that you're chasing. And it feels weird to watch it now. But one day, hopefully, when I have kids, it'll be a new tradition. But it's just kind of, I'm at peace with having done that. And it's going to be, a memory I'll cherish forever.
But surely you watched your episode back though, right?
I did, yeah. We had a watch party, and I got off to a kind of a hot start. There was a baseball category, and everybody watching me thought, "Oh, you're like, this is great." And I'm thinking in my head, "Yeah, just wait to see how this turns out." But no, I've watched it a couple times back. It's made for some good memes and some good clips. But yeah, it's it'll be a chapter in the memoir someday.
Oh yeah, it's always going to come up.
Yeah, for sure. It's, I also have a friend who had gone on a few years before me, and he lost too. And he gave me the advice when I was dealing with coming back off that high. He was like, listen, as you get older and it gets farther and farther away, no one's going to ask, how did you do on Jeopardy? You just say, Mike was on Jeopardy. That's all anyone says. And then you don't have to say how it went. You made it. And that's all you have to say. End of the story.
It's a great story, though, and thanks for sharing it with us. Earlier, we put out some tweets on X asking for questions for the show. So just to bring things back to the Mets very quickly. Obviously, within the last sort of 36 hours at the time of recording, the Mets have signed Juan Soto. It's not officially confirmed by the team yet, but obviously it's been widely reported across MLB. First of all, what are your thoughts on the Soto signing, and what else would you like to see the Mets, from a fan's perspective, what else would you like to see them do this offseason?
That part is funny too. We were talking earlier about that intersection of like fandom and being an employee. And like the Mets social media accounts, they can't say anything about Juan Soto, right? Because nothing's official yet. But people like us, at least we can have some fun and talk about it. So I'm glad. I feel bad for the admins, but I like the fact that we can do that here. I think it's incredible. How can you not like this signing? It's not my $765 million. So, the best boss I've ever had, Steve Cohen. Incredible stuff. And again, as someone who's been a Mets fan literally my entire life, this doesn't happen to the Mets. Alex Rodriguez does not come to the Mets. When he signs a 10-year, $250 million contract in 2003, whatever it was, that wasn't for the Mets. Mike Hampton, even though he takes the Mets to a World Series, does not re-sign with the Mets. He goes to the Colorado Rockies because they have the most money. This just doesn't happen. And now it does. And I think a lot of people that are nitpicking this, they're saying it's such a long deal, it's such an expensive deal. All he does is hit, and all the Yankees fans putting clips of like his misplays in right field on defense and things like that. Like, it's so much more than just that. And just that is not bad either. The kid's he's 26 years old. He's on a Cooperstown path. He's got a hitting profile that I think can become a David Ortiz or Edgar Martinez, even at the very end of that deal, even if he becomes a DH in 10 years. You're getting literally one of the best hitters the game has ever seen by a lot of different metrics before he even gets to his prime. So check. Even putting that aside, it's what it does. It's changing the Mets mentality and the perception as an organization. And we saw, the Mets dipping their toes in the water a bit on this with Justin Verlander and Max Scherzer and flirting with Shohei Ohtani last year. Those things didn't work out. This one did. It was only going to be a matter of time with Steve Cohen taking as many swings as he likes to take that one of them, was going to smash. And this is it. How often do you get a guy at this age who's that good and that proven to just come unhindered, losing no draft picks, trading no prospects? It's just money. And Steve Cohen has enough of that. So I think you can't I made this point on my social medias after the signing. You can't overpay if you can afford it. Like me buying a Lamborghini, that's an overpay. I'm a Nissan Altima guy. That's where I live. But, Ryan Seacrest is the guy that I always look at, a TV host. He can buy the Lamborghini. Like, it's not an overpay for him, even though they're both cars and they both get you from point A to point B. And it's what the market was. It wasn't like the Mets promised Soto $765 million and the next highest bidding team was offering him $400 million. Yeah. The Yankees are right there, $5 million behind. If you don't overpay to that number, you're not getting them. And so it's not an overpay, it's just a pay. It's basic supply and demand and the market and what it was. In a vacuum, I think it's bananas. I thought that $250 million contract Alex Rodriguez signed 20 years ago was earth-shattering and mind-blowing. Now that looks like one of the best contracts of all time with the way numbers are going in the Ohtani contract last year and this one this year. But he's making the fan base excited. I think he's going to click so well with the existing core that's already there. He is someone that New York has already embraced. We've seen that across town. So now a whole different side of New York can embrace. And it just goes to show you that the Mets are now fashioning themselves the big boys in town. It's not just the Yankees town and the Mets happen to also be there. Like, no, I'm the captain now. Like, the captain filled out the meme. That's what the Mets are trying to do. And you can't make that happen without splashes like this. So again, it's unofficial, not confirmed, but at the time of this recording, but if the Mets have so happened to officially agree with Juan Soto and he's there in orange and blue pinstripes next year, if you're a Mets fan, I don't know how you can be anything but elated for that. It's something that's never really happened in franchise history before. And those of us who are over the age of 25 have really earned it. All the young kids who think this is since the Steve Cohen era, you don't know what you were missing over the last few decades. So if you're a Mets fan, be uninhibitedly excited about this is all I can say to you.
Yeah,
are you
absolutely. Sorry, I was going to say, it's nice that we're no longer the little brother in town. Sorry, Tracy. Go on.
Are you going to be practicing your Soto shuffle for the big screen?
What am I doing with the Soto shuffle? Sorry, can you repeat that?
Are you going to be practicing your Soto shuffle to show on the big screen?
My hip flexors are way too tight to do like a proper Soto shuffle. I can't get that low. I'm also 13 years older than him, so the body's had a few more miles on the tires. But yeah, absolutely. I can almost guarantee there will be some kind of Soto shuffle related content or segment or something if I know my coworkers and what they like to cook up for next year. So yeah, for sure, I'll have to get working on that sooner than later.
Yeah, you can see that's going to be one of the between innings in the stands thing going on.
If maybe not the cap shuffle that, Toria, you hate so much. Maybe it's the Soto shuffle now. They hide a ball behind a cartoon Juan Soto, and you got to guess where.
Yeah, there you go. There you go. That would be so much better. I mean, when it goes to signings and stuff, I mean, here, so when that news broke, it was just after 3 a.m., which was pretty crazy. I mean, Tom, you were awake around the same time as me that time, right? And
I had a really weird feeling. Like at 3 a.m., I woke up suddenly. I was like,
no way.
I've got to check my phone. Like for some bizarre reason, I had a text message from someone saying Soto is a Met, and I was like, this is so weird. I had this feeling, but it wasn't just me either, was it? It was our Joe in the group as well.
Yeah, exactly.
She had a premonition and said, literally the day before, she said, any day now he's about to sign. It was just it was bizarre that we've all had this kind of sixth sense about it.
It's coming tomorrow is what she said the day before it happened.
Yeah.
Well, that was the thing, there were those leaks that he wanted it announced and done before the winter meetings, which started on Monday. It was going to be done by the weekend, but then you see so much other smoke. Oh, it's going to happen today, last Thursday, or no, it's going to wait till they're in the winter meetings. Like you never truly know. There's so much BS out there, especially on social media accounts. So we all kind of hoped it would happen over the weekend, but then here, it got to 9:30, 10 p.m. And I'm thinking, it's not happening. Time to go to bed soon. And you guys actually went to bed, but I guess something in the back of your mind knew it was happening. Yeah. And then, I was hoping to get to bed by 10:30 to start my Monday well rested. I ended up being awake until 1 a.m. just on Twitter and talking to friends and texting everybody. It was crazy.
It was absolutely crazy, but it was it was one of the moments where I texted another friend and was like, it's times like this I wish that I was in New York so that I could be watching this 24/7. I want to be watching MLB Network right now so that I can just soak it all in. But I think that the timing of the deal, I think it was always important because of the kind of discussions that happened during winter meetings. Everything was kind of hinging around what happened with Juan Soto, and I think everything now is going to come from that. The only thing that would be great is if they get things done a little bit earlier in the day or perhaps later, so that it's not 3 a.m. for us. Not that we're selfish or anything over here, but I'm sure that in the back of someone's mind they thought, what can we do to just mess up the Monday for the UK? I know.
Absolutely. Well, not that I know many people, but I'll try and put out some word that, hey, our friends in the UK need to know this, by bedtime. So wrap it up by our lunch, just to be correct.
Yeah, exactly. Thank you, please.
Speaking of wrapping it up, we always have 3 questions at the end that we ask our guests. So these are quick fire questions. No need to give it any thought. Just first thing that pops into your head.
Okay.
Tracy, over to you.
Your favorite Mets player, past or present?
Favorite Mets player, past or present? There's so many to choose from. People ask me this all the time. And as you can tell, I'm stalling to try and think of how I want to answer this question. I'm going to go with, and I could answer this differently tomorrow, but Edgardo Alfonso. He was a guy, again, part of those teams that were most critical to my upbringing when I was an early teenager. And he was just had this quiet dignity. He wasn't the flashiest. He wasn't the most outspoken, but he was the clutchest. Just went about, did his job, seemed like a nice guy. I've talked to Fonzie a bunch over the years, and he is a really nice guy, just like a real funny person. And he reminded me a lot of my grandpa, who was one of my favorite people I've ever met in my life. Just that very, funny if you get to know him, but he's just going to go in, do his job, clock in, clock out, be as reliable as you can be, and be there for you. So I'm going to go with that. But yeah, ask me tomorrow, and it could be Brandon Nimmo or David Wright or Mike Piazza. There's lots of options.
Okay, your favorite Mets moment?
My favorite Mets moment ever would be the Mike Piazza home run after September 11th, which growing up in New Jersey, I mean, we're right across the river from Staten Island where my parents grew up. Like, we could see the smoke from the Twin Towers coming home from school that day. So like, I would never say I was a New Yorker, but like, it hit literally in our backyard, that close to home. So to see, I mean, all of the emotions and everything happening in general, taking sports completely out of it, but then being a Mets fan, seeing how much the Mets kind of became the adopted team of New York, Shea Stadium being used as like the holding grounds and all that. And for us to be the team that was given that first game in New York, after the tragedy. And I remember I was sitting on my parents' floor, not even the couch. I was sitting on the floor, scratching the carpet because they had carpet back then before, hardwood floors were cool again, and think there's no way we're losing the first game back in New York after September 11th to the Braves of all teams. Like, there's no way this can happen. And we're running out of time. And Piazza comes up, and it's 10-foot ceiling. I must have hit my head on the ceiling, jumping as soon as he hit that home run. It blew my mind. My heart was in my throat. And, the first time I got to meet Mike, I made sure to thank him for that memory because obviously it means so much to so many people. And even though I wasn't there in person and I wasn't there working, again, it was just a time in my life where those kind of moments have such an outsized importance. But that moment had such an outsized importance in general to our city, our country, Mets fans, baseball fans. And that's, top of the list for me. And I don't think anything will ever top it until and unless the Mets, win a World Series, and maybe I'm there in person to watch the final out.
Okay, so the last question. You are given access to Uncle Steve's bank account.
Woo! I love it already.
Yeah, you can make one trade. They don't have to be a free agent. Who would you sign and why?
Oh boy. So basically, any player in baseball can come to the Mets.
Yep.
I think if you don't answer Shohei Ohtani, then you're not answering the question, because he's maybe the best hitter in baseball. Steals 50 bases. We see that in his arsenal now after last year. And he's going to come back healthy and can pitch Cy Young quality innings on the mound. So and his contract is cheaper than Juan Soto. So he's a steal. I think, and he's still in his prime, and just the exposure and the other fans that he can bring involved. I think at this point in his career, and he's proven that he can do it two ways successfully. If you don't pick Ohtani, I think you got the question wrong.
Fantastic. Okay, so Mike, thank you ever so much for bringing your passion and energy that you bring to the Mets pregame show to the pod tonight. As a reminder to all of our regular listeners, or if you're listening for the first time, you can find us on YouTube and Spotify. We have a playlist on our YouTube account of all of our guest series. So far this year, we have had the likes of Wayne Randazzo, Jerome, aka JMac Customs, the guy behind the OMG sign. We've also had John DeMarsico, Laura Albanese, and Colin Cosell. Mike Janela, thank you ever so much for being on the pod. Any closing thoughts?
No, thank you guys so much. You rock, and obviously it's easy being a Mets fan here in New York and New Jersey. Not as simple over across an entire ocean. So you guys are great. Just love the passion, dedication you have for a team that a lot of us grow up with here in our face every day. But that commitment and dedication that you have over there really, really means a lot. And I'm a big Anglophile. I love visiting the UK. So next time I'm over, you'll be hearing from me, and maybe we can do one of these in person or something.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Thank you so much.
And again, let's go Mets. Last thing I'll say.
Yes.
Absolutely. Let's go Mets.